And I'm Carol Ann.
And I'm Colette.
My question for you today is, what does Muhammad Ali, Neil Diamond, Michael J. Fox, Billy Graham, Linda Ronstadt, Alan Otto, Philip Yancey all have in common? If you guessed Parkinson's disease, you are correct. Parkinson's is a chronic, progressive, neurodegenerative disease with an unknown cause and which currently has no cure. Some sources say Parkinson's disease, or PD, is the fastest growing neurological disease in the world. More than 100,000 people in Canada have it, and it is estimated that 25 people will be newly diagnosed every day with the disease in Canada. Worldwide estimates range from 6 to 10 million people affected worldwide. We wanted to highlight Parkinson's disease because April 11th is World Parkinson's Day. Why do I know so much about Parkinson's? I have Parkinson's. I was diagnosed with the disease in 2018. With no family history of the disease, I was unprepared to hear from a neurologist that I had it. It was both shocking and devastating. After a few months of grieving, I reached out to our local Parkinson's support group, where I met the most amazing couple. Nora Lea, who has had Parkinson's disease for several years, and her husband Wayne, who also is her caregiver, greeted me as soon as I entered the support group. They made me feel welcome and at ease. It is with great joy that I welcome their voice to Recovering Your Voice today.
Parkinson's is an interesting phenomenon. It is a disease, but it's unique to persons. So if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. It seems to affect everybody a little bit differently, and everybody comes at it with a different story and a different history. We may have some commonalities in symptoms that make it possible to diagnose, but everybody is unique in what set of symptoms they develop. And I was looking back at some of the symptoms that I started with many years ago. And there's still a pain. Tremors, spasms, aching, stiffness, one side not keeping up with the other, sore joints, stiff, rigid joints. This is all things that we experience some degree of. The traditional words, the old-fashioned words, were stiff, slow, and shaky, with stoop posture and instability. But stiff, slow, and shaky can vary from person to person. It's been an interesting ride as we've come a long way over the years. I was diagnosed in 1991 at the age of 43, and our children were still quite young. But the Lord has given us the grace to go on and turn that into something positive. And we have met some of the most wonderful people through the Parkinson's support group and being able to serve there. Wayne?
Well, I actually think that Nora Lea was showing symptoms much before she was diagnosed. I can remember when we were first married. When we were first married, we had a little farm. And we had dairy goats, and Nora Lea was making cheese and yogurt and doing all the farm wifey things and raising 2 kids. But we were out for a walk, and Nora Lea made a comment about she was always a fast walker. And the thought that went through my mind was, wow, if this is fast. and the other thing I can distinctly remember was watching her one time reach for a salt shaker. And the movement was so slow and so deliberate. I remember thinking, it's as if she had to focus on that salt shaker to pick it up. And in actual fact, this is what she had to do. With Parkinson's, that automatic movement where I can talk to you and at the same time reach over and pick my glass up just doesn't happen. I'm either talking to you or I'm picking my glass up, but I'm not doing two things at once. And so it's all been part of a learning process. One of the just speaking as a caregiver, I guess since we've been on this journey for so long and it has been so gradual that you just grow into it. I find that folks that have the greatest difficulty are those with, Nora Lea would have to give you a technical term for it, but a fast-acting Parkinson's, where you're diagnosed and in 2 years you're bad, and then 3 years you're worse, and in 5 years you could be really bad. And those individuals, I find, have a much harder time adapting to it. But Parkinson's has just been part of our life, so you just grow with it, if you will. It does change your dreams for the future. One of the things I distinctly remember when Nora Lea was diagnosed, I asked her what the prognosis is or was, and she said, I will probably never see 70. So, as a young married couple, not so young, but married, the thought was, wow, we have a limited amount of time here. And so it made you kind of cherish the time that you had. And every day that we have together to me is a blessing. So, I don't complain about the disease. My thought is, and the one I've shared with the group, is don't mourn the things you can no longer do, but cherish the things that you can still do together, or you can still do. It's all, I think, about attitude when it comes to living with Parkinson's. As a caregiver, one of the things that I think we have to guard against, and it can sneak up on you quite insidiously, is burnout. I often heard people talk about burnout, and I would say, I can't understand this. I do not identify with it. But it's life's little things that sneak up on you without you really being aware of it. I'm on the elders board at the church. I'm a co-leader for our life groups. We have 20 life groups in the church. I was writing weekly Bible studies for our life groups. I was heading up the church incorporation team. And at the same time, all of this is happening. Nora Lea is having issues. She goes in for a pacemaker. Our daughter has a tumor and she has to go for surgery. And then I developed PMR, which is polymyalgia rheumatica. It is a rheumatic inflammation of the body, which is very painful and very debilitating. And until I went on prednisone and the symptoms disappeared, it was absolutely scary because I could hardly take care of myself, let alone take care of Nora Lea. But the whole point here is that I was doing a lot of things that were perhaps creating little stresses in my life that I didn't recognize. And it led me to a point of exhaustion and probably the PMR as a result, because that, I understand, can be a stress-induced condition. So I'm trying to get over that now. And in addition to that, we both had COVID in the early part of November, and I ended up with long COVID out of it. So, so my energy levels, the pits. But you know, the Lord keeps us through it all and gives us the strength to meet the challenge of each day, and I'm so thankful for that. But I'm just thankful that we're still together and still enjoying life.
Nora Lea, could you describe what life was like for you before your diagnosis, and then perhaps the symptoms that made you seek medical attention?
Yes, before I was diagnosed, I thought I was living a pretty normal life. I was busy, I was doing a lot of different things, but I had these niggling symptoms that would occur periodically, and I couldn't get an answer for, like arthritic type pains. So you see a rheumatologist, no diagnosis. Tremor in the finger, you see a neurologist, no diagnosis. Spasms in the leg where a muscle would tear, part of a muscle would tear. And you see a sports medicine guy, no diagnosis. And just lots of strange things. Slowness of movement had to be the worst, because I was used to being able to do a dozen things at once, or make my list on Monday and it would be done by 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. And then it got to be where I make my list on Monday and I'd be lucky if it was done by Friday. It just didn't happen. And at one point, I remember seeing my GP, and he said, "You're too young for Parkinson's, but that's what it sounds like." But they just brushed it off. And then when I was diagnosed, it was a relief to know it's something real. It's not something all in my head. Well, it was in my head, or falling out of my head as the brain cells died. But it was a profound sense of relief. And then there was the concept that things really hadn't changed. If the diagnosis was made today, tomorrow wouldn't be any different. It would be pretty much the same, and it would gradually get worse. And that's one thing I've mentioned a few times in our group, is Parkinson's gives us the gift of time to prepare for disability. I remember a girlfriend had a stroke around the same time that I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, give or take a year or two. But she woke up paralyzed on one side. She didn't know it. She got up to go to the bathroom and collapsed on the floor. But that was a sudden onset disability. Whereas with Parkinson's, we have time to prepare, to get our lives in order. Stop procrastinating. I haven't learned that yet. But it's being diagnosed made it easier because you knew what was wrong and you weren't always questioning. So it put you at ease in a way. And then you could say, "Oh, that's the Parkinson's." And then get on with life and do what you can and make the most of it.
And Nora Lea, those words mean so much to me. I've never looked at it in that way. The gift of time to prepare. And that analogy of someone having, an immediate stroke or a heart attack or something and life changing, whereas we have time to get used to it. I know when I first was diagnosed, I would look at the end result. Where is Parkinson's going to take me? And I found it so overwhelming and so discouraging and debilitating. And when you can just narrow it into today, enjoying today, and what Wayne said, the blessings, instead of mourning what you can't do, mourn what you have right here, or don't mourn what you have right here, make use of it. So how did your family, your friends, how did you adjust, still in your 40s and having children at home? How did you get through that? Was it just, again, day at a time?
One day at a time. Yes, it was one day at a time. And we told the kids that I had Parkinson's, and they understood in a way, because I had looked after a lady that had MS and was bedbound and tube fed and catheter, the whole bit. They were familiar with the concept that disease can happen, but your mind can be just fine. Your body may not cope. This lady had been a kindergarten teacher, and when she learned that I had small children, I would work with her. She invited them to come to the camp with her on the island, and we would go, and she would pay me to look after her. There would be myself and an RNA, a nursing assistant, they were called then. And we would take the kids, and we'd have a weekend or a period of time with them on the island. And lots of their memories were associated with this lady. And they're good memories. So when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, they said, "Oh, are you going to be just like that lady with MS?" And I said, "Well, maybe not. It's a different type of disease," but they understood the concept of disease. And it was just like they had been prepared by the Lord before this happened. And it really paid off in their understanding of me, and their gift to me now as adults is amazing. They are so caring and tender-hearted and willing to do anything, which is mind-boggling.
I think one of the things that happens when a person is first diagnosed is their mind immediately goes to the worst case scenario. And some folks just get right into the research, and they read all of these things that could happen and may never happen. And I think one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is to just live each day, enjoy each day, and let the Lord take care of the future. We don't know what the future is, and worrying about it isn't going to change it. So if there's a saying, if I can remember it correctly, that if you worry about it and it comes to pass, you have lived it twice. If you worry about it and it doesn't come to pass, you have wasted all of that emotional energy. So just live your life and enjoy what you can while you can.
Very wise words, Wayne. You also said, though, and Nora Lea said, that you have time to prepare. So are there ways that you would suggest to others that you should make preparations for in a case of Parkinson's disease, where it's slow moving and over a great deal of time?
Well, when we were, let's say, looking for a house, when we moved in from Onaping, in Onaping, we lived in a 2-story house. And when we moved into Sudbury in 2001, we definitely looked for a bungalow. We looked for something that had everything that Nora Lea needed on one floor. We looked for a place that didn't have, let's say, flights of stairs coming up into the main living area. We have 3 steps that can be managed quite nicely. And having an attached garage was a priority because Nora Lea can go from the house into the vehicle in the garage without having to go outside. And cold really impacts her in the winter. So to be able to get into a vehicle without getting out into that cold and then getting into a freezing vehicle is a huge advantage. So those are just like preparatory things, but I think we really haven't, I think, looked at life with the point of view that I'm going to become more disabled as we go along. One of the things that I did do, though, years ago, was I took the bathtub out and put a shower in. And it's a large walk-in shower because it was too difficult and risky for Nora Lea to be getting into a bathtub where you had to step over that side. And the risk of falling was just high. But it is easy to step over that little lip and get into the shower, and it makes it much easier to provide assistance during shower. But it's little things like that.
Yeah. The other little things that we did was we looked at our finances. And I was working as a nurse. I was part-time and I was doing a lot of home care with an agency where I would look after people in their homes. And the driving was getting to be, especially in the winter, it was getting to be high risk because we lived in Onaping and I would travel to Joe Lake in Hanmer or somewhere in Cape Rel or Lively, and it was just too much. So I looked for another job that would give me the same dollar income, but it might be more hours because the rate would be less. And the Lord opened the door. I had a job right in Levac, which is a twin town of Onaping, as you probably know. And I was 5 minutes from work. I worked in a chiropractor's office. I liked him. We still like him. We still go to him. And that's important because you don't always respect your boss, but I sure did respect him. And it gave me the opportunity to develop a whole new set of skills. And I did his books and I did his accounting for his office in Onaping or in Levac, but also in Noelville and St. Charles. And along the way, we opened the office in Sudbury. But the skills that I developed there, I have since been able to use with the Parkinson support group, like the use of spreadsheets in Excel and bookkeeping and the whole bit. But the job was there, that it was not shift work. It was easy for our kids to access. If they had problems at school, they could just walk up to the medical office and be there with me. It was God opened the doors as we went along, and as we needed doors opened, they opened.
I think one of the things too that is important for a person living with Parkinson's is to stay involved in life. Life has to have a value and a purpose, and becoming involved with the Parkinson support group has certainly been a big part of Nora Lea's life over the last 20 years. I think she has been the support group secretary for that length of time. And I was the president for, I think it was either 7 years or 9 years, I forget. You can just call it brain fog. But but it was doing things together. But that being part of that support group has certainly given Nora Lee's life a great deal of value, in that she has impacted a lot of people. And because of her nursing background and her personality, she has been just a tremendous help for other folks who are starting this journey, and quite a source of information. But I think it's really helped us to have us both involved in something together. It certainly kept us close, and there was no, let's say, lack of conversation. We would be planning meetings, and in the few years ago, planning conferences or making trips to Toronto, or all of the things that you can do together, because sometimes a debilitating disease can create a wedge if you're not, say, working at maintaining and developing a relationship through it.
You mentioned the support group. So could you tell us a little bit more about it? Were you two instrumental in beginning it, or was it there before you started going to it? Just a little bit background on the Sudbury support system for Parkinson's.
Well, the support group was started by 3 men, or 2 men and 1 woman, many years ago, around 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. We can't find the details exactly. There wasn't, the records at Parkinson Canada are not easily accessible. They haven't been able to find them. But around 2000, 2001, there was a professor, Lloyd Reed, professor of physics at the university, and Gary Sheminsky, he was a salesman, very pleasant gentleman, and Mark Paland, whose wife Anne stepped in and said, "We've got to find some answers. There's this disease out here, and we need to know." So they approached Parkinson Canada and were able to establish a support group. And that was before I had moved to Sudbury, because I knew that as long as I lived in Onaping, I wouldn't be able to attend. It would be too much, too far, and it just wouldn't be worth it. So the group formed from there, and it met at the university or at the hospital, and then I joined when we did move into Sudbury, and I was getting frustrated because the meetings would be scheduled at the hospital, and then the classroom would be closed because of flu. The hospital was closed. It couldn't come in. So then somebody would try and organize something at the university, and you couldn't find the classroom, or the parking was too far, or, there's always something. And I thought, well, we could have it at the church. And we approached the pastor at All Nations and said, sure, why not? So we moved to All Nations Church on Preet Street, and we've been with All Nations ever since. And that's, they've been gracious. They've allowed us space. They've never charged us. Not only allowed us space, they've allowed us to use the audio-visual equipment. And that has been a very, very helpful thing. And even when we built the new building, we were the first group that was allowed to use it for extra church courses or meetings.
One of the things I started doing when I became president was have PowerPoint presentations for our meetings. Coming from an engineering background, I was accustomed to developing PowerPoint presentations and making them all the time. But I find that when we are having a meeting, it is very helpful to have the slides on the screen so that the folks who are listening to us talk about a subject can not only hear it, but they can see it. And one of the things I've come to appreciate over the years is that the thought processes for somebody living with Parkinson's is a bit slower. And it's slower because, among other reasons, because energy is taken away from just listening to doing things like moving a chair, picking up a cup. It takes attention to do these things, and that diverts your attention perhaps from what is being said. But I think we all learn better when we can see and read at the same time we're hearing. And that has been very helpful. And as those of you who have been at the new facility know, there are 3 big TV screens across the front. So it doesn't matter where we're sitting in the room. You always have a good view of the screen. And I think that makes the meeting more enjoyable and certainly gives you an opportunity to be better informed about what is going on and what we're talking about.
I can say from a point of view of someone who has attended those meetings that the facility is incredible because, first of all, it's totally accessible. Go right from, the street on into the room. And as you say, the visual and sound is all there. And it's so informative. It's very informative. You've always got, some kind of guest speaker or some kind of new thing that we talk about at the meeting. And it allows that group me too feeling. You can talk to people going through the same kinds of problems. So if there's anybody, any of our listeners that are know someone who is has PD or knows of someone who is affected in any way, I would encourage them to look up the Parkinson's support group, and we will have all that information plus Parkinson's Canada and other websites listed in below the video in our description.
I'm just wondering how we can come alongside and be a support for somebody with Parkinson's or the caregiver that's experiencing burnout, practical ways that we can come alongside them.
As a caregiver, one of the things that I recognized up front, and I think part of this was as a result of the support group meeting and talking to people with Parkinson's and their caregivers at the support group meetings, is sometimes there was a lot of frustration and even anger from the perspective of the caregiver. And part of it was frustration that the person living with Parkinson's was so slow in perhaps moving, or they would freeze. And I thought about this after speaking with individuals, and it just seemed to me that there needed to be more of a discussion around the symptoms that a person experiences when they're living with Parkinson's. And just because they're walking slowly, or they're sitting in the car after the door's opened, or they're stopped in the doorway, they're not doing that just to be irritating. They're doing that because they cannot move. the signal is not getting through to the legs. So it is something that I think when you're aware of it, it may help you deal with it from the point of view of being a caregiver. There are so many things that perhaps I just take for granted because we have been living with it for so long. But I was a person who, if you couldn't be on time, my stomach would go in knots, and you would just be like, I would be driving fast to make it someplace on time because we were late getting away. So then you just learn that you start earlier so that you are on time. And the other thing that I did was change my attitude. I said, okay, if we're late, we're late. You can't do anything about it. But what is more important, being on time or having a pleasant journey and a safe journey? So it's all about, I think, consideration for your partner. And Nora Lea is very good. Like, we start early in preparing so that we are on time. And so it's been a bit of a learning experience for both of us to go through this. I believe communication between the caregiver and the person with Parkinson's is key. Stating what you're going through is not complaining or whining, but it is letting your care partner know what you are experiencing. And if we don't know what you are experiencing, then we can't help. And I think there were a lot of times earlier where Nora Lea would experience very painful muscle spasms and just suck it up and say nothing. But I actually appreciate knowing when she is going through them. It just gives you an understanding of what she is experiencing. And as a result of those muscle spasms, she's experiencing mechanical issues with her shoulder and torn muscles and ligaments and the pain that goes with that, and so on. But I think communication is key between both parties. And I think the other thing is enjoy life and always find something to laugh about. Now, there is lots of laughter in our household. It just, I don't know whether it's just our personalities, but there's always something to laugh about and joke about. And we have, I've got a brother who actually could be my twin. He is younger than I am, but we are alike in a lot of ways. And when we're together with them, it's just constant laughter. In fact, when my family's together, it just seems to be constant laughter. But that makes life, enjoyable and worth living. And the other thing is to surround yourself with positive people. There's nothing that drags you down more than a whiner or a complainer. But to surround yourself with a group of friends or people that build you up, that encourage you, that can laugh with you, that can understand what you're going through. And we have a couple who have been friends. Well, they were friends of mine long before Nora Lea and I met, and they've become very good friends of ours. But just a tremendous support over the years. So I think the worst thing we can do is just isolate ourselves, but stay involved in life. We've been involved with the support group. We've been involved at the church. I was on the pastoral staff for a few years. Nora Lea wrote the junior church, the children's church curriculum. She made sure we had teachers. Basically, every time I was in some sort of ministry, Nora Lea was there right alongside me, involved in something too. So we've always been involved in life together. We have never taken separate holidays. The only time we've ever taken a holiday without the children was when they were probably 3 or 4. And we left them with my brother in Elliott Lake and went to St. Joseph's Island for a weekend. But other than that, we've always had family vacations that have lasted 4 or 5 weeks where we would take a trailer and go camping someplace, travel across Canada to the East Coast or the West Coast, or visit family. But life is, I'm going to call it doing life together. That is where the joy is, in doing life together. Was that a bit rambling?
Just a bit there, but I ramble too, so we'll ramble together. Colette was asking how to come alongside somebody with Parkinson's, and I think you've touched on it, Wayne, that it's patience. Patience while you let them do things at their speed. Patience while they wait for the words to come out, because sometimes they don't always come out the way you want them to. Sometimes they don't even come to you the way you want them to. You're drawing a blank looking for a word. There is an aspect of Parkinson's for some people where the words come too fast, and then you can't tell them apart. And that can be very frustrating because there's one word that leads to the other, and next thing you don't know what we're saying. But if you have patience and the person with Parkinson's has patience, you can often figure out what they're saying. I know one fella calls often, and I just have to ask him to repeat. I didn't get that. What was that again? And he will, without getting cross or frustrated, he will repeat it. And by about the third time, I've figured out what it is he's trying to say. But not everybody gets that. Not everybody gets that particular symptom. So for others, it may be slowness of speech, and for some, it's fastness of speech.
I would say that I have probably listened to too many politicians, and they never answer the question.
I have to say, you both answered my question beautifully, because Wayne, my personality is somewhat like yours. And Nora, my best friend, personality is like yours. And I want to come alongside her. And I want to know both sides of what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. So I think you guys answered it really well. And I'm keeping myself together right now, okay? So thank you. You touched on it both. Wayne, you brought things into my thoughts that it's like, I can do better. I can do better. And Nora Lea, you brought me into the thoughts of sometimes I'm not aware or sensitive enough. So thank you. You both did well, and I gleaned from both of you. Are there things we can do in our home to make it a safe place for somebody that's in the journey of Parkinson's?
Nora Lea, I think I will take this one and give your voice a rest. Nora Lea's voice can run out if she's doing a lot of talking. But one of the first things I did in this place, I mentioned that I took the tub out and installed a shower. The other thing I did was remove all of the rugs. So we have hardwood floors throughout the house. One of the issues for a person living with Parkinson's is being able to lift their feet. So right now, Nora Lea walks with a walker, or she walks with canes, but her feet do not lift. And it would be very dangerous and difficult if she was dragging her feet across rugs, where if a shoe slides on a hardwood floor or a slipper slides on a hardwood floor, much easier. The other thing is there are no scatter rugs. There are no rugs in our house. So there's nothing to create a tripping hazard. We do have a difference in elevation of about 2¼ inches between our kitchen and the rest of the house. When the kitchen family room was added to the house, they didn't do a very good job in the construction, and the floors did not line up. So I have a ramp to give that gradual incline from the kitchen up into the living room. And that means that she can walk up that ramp without having to take that step. And when you're pushing a walker, you don't want to be negotiating a 2¼ inch step. It just wouldn't be practical. We installed handholds in the shower, and the way our bathroom is designed, we didn't need them beside the toilet, but on the toilet we have a device that has the arms already built into it, so that it makes it easy for her to get down and get up. We have a side rail on the bed that is right beside her shoulders, so that it can help her get in and out of bed. And I have a light mounted on the side rail so that she can get in bed, just flick a switch and the light goes out. So, there are things like that that you can do to just make life easier. We're going to be looking at putting a chairlift in from the kitchen down to the side door, because walking is just, the stairs are becoming an issue to negotiate. And we have resisted to this point, because it is good to move and to use your legs as much as you can. But then there gets to a point where the pain and the risk of trying to negotiate the steps outweigh any potential benefit of using those muscles to climb the step. Some of our family we don't stay with anymore when we go to Ottawa or go to Toronto, because the bedrooms are on the second floor and you can't negotiate the steps. So it limits what we do and where we go, but we can still get together and have a good time when we're with them.
Yeah, can I add a couple of things? When you're having a friend over for coffee, don't fill the cup too full. Because when you try and pick it up, I might be steady now, but when the pills wear off, I might be shaky, and then it splatters. Or the other thing that we find and have found over the years tremendously helpful is straws. Straws are such a blessing, because you don't have to tip the cup up. And your neck, I don't know about you, Bonnie, but for me, my neck gets quite stiff and it only goes back so far. And a straw just makes it so much safer and easier to manage. And when you have somebody for dinner, if they're having issues with their hands, they could have a struggle cutting their meat. So it might be nice to plan a menu that involves small pieces of meat, or like spaghetti sauce, or something that the meat is not an issue. And it makes it easier for the party to appear more relaxed. Well, they are more relaxed because they're not fighting with their food. And it just makes life easier. For some people, weighted spoons are helpful. People will often buy cutlery that is modified for people with disabilities, but not everybody needs those. Sometimes just a heavier fork or a heavier spoon does the trick. But those are little things. When people come, you can offer them to let them choose which chair they will sit in, because it will suit them and make them more comfortable. I find a straight back chair works better for me, and the ones that lean way back are most uncomfortable for the long term. But a straight back chair you can sit in for quite some time. It gives you some support. But one thing that happened to us, we had friends that were long-term friends from many years ago. She and I had gone to high school together in Ottawa years before we met again in Sudbury at All Nations. And they moved with the bank. So they were down south and they were building another home. And they called to ask how wide my walker was so they could make the doorways big enough for us. And I thought, now that is a gift. That is a gift.
One of the things I had to do was replace the side door in the house with one that was 36 inches wide, so that, and this was a planning for the future event that I undertook several years ago, and it allows a walker to go in and out the door. It would allow a wheelchair to go in and out of the door. Unfortunately, the door going into my garage is narrow, so now I'm looking at tearing that door out and making that one wider. That's a little more complicated because part of the foundation comes up to the edge of the door, so I've got to cut that out too. But it's things like that that you have to do to just make life easier for you. I was noticing, just looking at you three ladies, that you're all smiling. And one of the things that I found with Nora Lea a few years ago, she's smiling now, but there was a time when she had this typical mask-like expression that a person with Parkinson's often has, and it can be very disconcerting. I led a Bible study in the house here, and we would be sitting around and I would be talking about something, and I would look at Nora Lea and her face would be totally expressionless. So immediately my mind would go to, am I totally out to lunch here? Am I saying something that isn't right? And it can be very disconcerting. But when you realize that when you're speaking to somebody with Parkinson's, they're not always able to smile or to have an expressive face, it helps when you're in that situation. When you're talking to them, just because they're not reacting doesn't mean they're not hearing and they're not understanding, and it doesn't mean you're out to lunch. It's just that they're not able to react to what you're saying.
I totally understand what you're saying, Wayne, because I like to read the people too. Like, I'm very much like feedback, and I understand exactly what you're saying there. And I've started to look for clues too. We were at the camp, Bonnie and I. We were going back, and so my thought was, get her to receptionist fast as I can. And so I did. Unbeknownst to me, when we parked, Bonnie paid the price because the anxiety kicked up her tremors. So now I watch for tremors to see if she's comfortable in the situation or not. And usually I'm the cause of the tremors. I admit it.
We do not travel in the winter anymore. The Nora Lea's anxiety level goes up when the meds are in part of their cycle. We had started down home. We both come from the Ottawa area. We had started down home one time, and it was foggy. And I asked Nora Lea, "How are you feeling?" She said, "I'm on the point of tears." Well, I just turned around and came back home. So we used to travel regardless of the weather. There would be snowstorms where you were out of your mind to be on the road, and we would be on the road anyway, and it didn't bother us. But as the Parkinson's progresses, anxiety levels do change, and your ability to cope with things change. So as a care partner, you have to be aware of these and adjust your life accordingly. The other thing that we do when we travel, several years ago, I bought a road trek. It's a camper van, and we do all of our traveling in that. It makes it easier for us because it has an onboard washroom. So you don't have to worry about, especially when you have mobility issues or you're moving with a walker, you don't have to worry about finding a spot, taking the walker out, and all of the issues and the time involved in getting to a washroom someplace. And if you're not in an area where you have a service center, sometimes these washrooms are very small and very difficult to get into. So having that road trek has made traveling much more enjoyable for us. Before Nora Lea's Parkinson's was as advanced as it is now, we would go camping in it. And it was a great little thing to camp with. We still have it, but we have it strictly for traveling.
I learned so much from both of you in that discussion. First of all, Wayne, what you said to, as the person with Parkinson's, you appreciate the person telling you when they need help. And that has been important, I've noticed with Dan and I, because for instance, I am not good when it gets closer to supper time with my Parkinson's. As the evening goes on, as the day goes on, I slow down. So I do a lot of prep in the morning, and Dan would always ask, like, why are you getting supper ready now? And, when I could explain to him, well, now I can do it without, worrying about cutting my finger or those sorts of things. And so communication is so important, letting your caregiver know, what you're facing and why you're doing certain things. And then Nora Lea, those little suggestions of things right here on my desk. I've got my straw and I've learned that there are, better ways to use items for drinking and for meals. I actually travel now with a cup when I go to friends so that I don't have to navigate that little teacup that everybody wants to give you because you're a guest in their home. So thank you for all of that from both of you. It really confirmed to me.
I have heard some people tell their story and have been amazed when they say something along the lines of, I wouldn't trade facing that for anything because through it, I learned something so deep, or it changed my relationship with my family or with God. And I was just wondering what your perspective in your experience on that was.
I think it has changed a lot of things for the better. There's a lot of things I would not trade it for. In other words, if you look around, there's somebody almost worse off than you. But I have learned a lot, and the Lord has really opened our eyes to see that we have a mission in the world as well as a ministry in the church. Actually, I'll go back to the All Nations motto: to know, grow, and go. The church mission is that you come to know the Lord Jesus, that you grow in his knowledge and grace, and you go and make a difference in the world. And I've found that being involved with people with Parkinson's has been my mission field. Not that I aim to make converts, but that I aim to share the love of God with the people I'm in contact with. And before we were involved in the support group, we were involved in small groups and lots of things at the church, but all of our friends were Christians. And we weren't meeting anybody that didn't already know the Lord. And this was an opportunity. It was just like the Lord spoke to us and said, this is your mission. This is your mission field. And use it wisely. And we hope we have.
That's beautiful. I'm sure you are making a difference. Even just hearing your story, it's a high impact story. Thank you.
You know, Paul writes in Philippians 4 that we are to rejoice in the Lord always, that we are not to be anxious about anything. We're to be content in every situation, and we're to do all things through the Lord who gives us strength. And Philippians also says that my God will meet all of our needs. And those verses of scripture, you know, have really come alive to me over the years. And I think the other verse that I memorized years ago was James chapter 1, where it says, consider it all joy when faced with trials of many kinds. And the word there is when faced, not if we are faced with trials, but when we are faced with trials, because the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must complete its work. But I think apart from, we can't change what is going on, but we can be assured of our future. And having that sure knowledge that we are safe in Christ can make living the day-to-day challenges much, much easier. I would say that Nora Lea and I have certainly grown closer as a result of Parkinson's disease. You know, as we are meeting the day-to-day challenges of, let's say, assisting Nora Lea, I can look at it as something that I have to do or as something we get to do together. So whether it is helping her shower or dress or get a meal or put her coat on or whatever, it's something that we are doing together. And these shared experiences, I think, have really drawn us closer together. The other thing is we have met some really wonderful people who are on the same journey we are on, and people who we have come to love and care a great deal about, and who have become great friends. And we would never have met these folks if it wasn't for our Parkinson's journey. And I think, too, that we know so many people who have really serious health challenges, much worse than Parkinson's. And living this journey gives you greater empathy for those who are on a similar but different journey. And I would have to say, when I mentioned PMR earlier, that having that debilitating pain and lack of mobility gave me a great deal more empathy for what Nora Lea lives with on a daily basis and what she has been living with on a daily basis. Because before I went on the prednisone, I couldn't lift my hand to my ear. I couldn't reach my armpit to wash myself. That's how restricted my motions were. And when you experience that yourself, it gives you a much, much better understanding of what a person is living with when they have Parkinson's.
Are there any last words that you would like to share with our audience?
I would say that one of the things that we are very blessed by is Nora Lee's mind is very good. And when you consider that 60% of people who have Parkinson's develop Parkinson's dementia, that is a real blessing. It certainly enhances our, let's say, relationship and communication when her mind is good. Part of the reason I think that her mind is good may be because she has stayed involved with life. And if you retire from life and you're not challenging yourself, I think dementia sets in much more easily. So we're really blessed in that respect. We know a lot of people who are dealing, where a partner has dementia. I know how difficult that is to deal with. Dad had dementia. And while I wasn't a caregiver, I can't imagine what it's like to live with someone who asks you the same question 20 times in 5 minutes, and it's just, a repeat all the time. Or what it's like to live with somebody with Alzheimer's. And we know folks who are living that life. So I consider ourselves to be really blessed in spite of the disease. Sometimes I almost feel guilty that Nora Lea is doing so well when we know so many people who haven't been diagnosed as long and aren't doing as well. But one of the takeaways from that is, as Nora Lea mentioned earlier, everybody's Parkinson's is different. So you don't know what your journey is going to be. I would end with the thought that, and I'll go back to what I had said earlier, don't worry about what you can't do today. Embrace what you can do and enjoy it. And don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's in the Lord's hands. So you may live quite a normal life with restrictions and may never see that debilitating state that some folks go through. Or maybe maybe you'll be one of those people that have a much more difficult time, but you're in the Lord's hands through it all. And to me, that is what is most important. Nora Lee's sister's cousin passed away very suddenly, died in his sleep, totally out of the blue. You never know when your time is going to come, but just enjoy the time that you do have and just thank God for it.
Yeah, one thing that I thought I might mention is when you're diagnosed with Parkinson's and you've got a chronic neurodegenerative disease, one that goes downhill. It progresses, but it's progressing downhill, not uphill. It's so easy to focus on yourself, but it's not all about me. And that's something to remember, that I have a care partner who I need to look out for as well. I need to keep my needs and whims in balance because I'm asking a lot of him. Wayne has to do his job and whatever he's doing for his work. Now he's retired, but he was working for many years. He has to do his household responsibilities. He's had to take over my household responsibilities. He's had to take over the cooking. And then he's added to that the care for me and help in that way. And I can't demand of him too much. I have to be aware that he has needs too. And I think the Lord gives us the grace to understand each other. And I pray that he will give me the grace to understand Wayne and his needs, that we might be a team together. While I may look at being a burden, I also have to look at is the ability it gives him to find joy in serving.
You'll notice that we use the word care partner, not caregiver or caretaker. And it really speaks to that, where we are aware of one another's needs and we care for one another. And Nora Lea always shows her appreciation for what I do. Like, she never asks anyone without saying please or thank me or tell me how much she appreciates it. And that goes a long way to encouraging a care partner. And but anyway, Lord is good. We do what we can.
I must say that we started out the show thinking we were doing a show on Parkinson's, but I really believe that we're doing a show on a love story between you two, and being able to see a glimpse into what makes a great partnership in life. You two have shown grace and love and kindness and compassion towards each other, and that just spills out in your life to all those around you. So I want to thank you for being vulnerable to share what goes on in your lives and how you've adapted to something that others may look at as being a tragedy, but you have turned it into such a good story. So thank you very much for sharing your lives with us today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It has been lovely. You ladies have a very neat podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you have questions or concerns or want to comment on our show today, you can write us at recoveringyourvoice@gmail.com. Until next time, keep sharing your stories. Has no cure. Some sources say PD or you guys can unmute now.
Do you really want me to do that? Can you still hear me now?
Yeah.
Well, you try it. Somebody try.
La 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 la.
You can still hear
La
it
la
too.
la la.
La 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 la. Yeah, that won't work.
No.
We'll
Note
figure
to
that
self. Note to self. I'm trying to remember the things I said when I thought I was offline.
Ah,
Hi, Wayne.
Oh, hi.
Good.
It's good to see you. How are you doing?
And here comes Nora Lea.
My computer is faster than hers.
And Wayne and Nora Lea are in the same house.
Different
It's good you
rooms.
guys are talking, okay?
Well,
I'm in my
we have found with these with Zoom meetings that it is better for each of us to be on our computer rather than trying to squeeze two of us into the same frame.
I was going to say that the very first time I went on a Zoom with the two of them in the meeting, I thought, are Wayne and Nora Lea not getting along?
So when I pull my earlobe, I want to say something.
That's right. Whatever works for you, Wayne.
Speak up. Have any questions?
I have lots of questions coming out of that, Wayne. I told the girls before we came on, I said, it was Nora Lea and Wayne and the atmosphere that was in that support group. I'm going to cry now. There was such positiveness. There was nobody there moaning and begroaning what had happened to them. You know, everybody was embracing life and living to the fullness and expressing gratitude. And it just turned me around. It turned me around to look at things differently. So that's an amazing gift that you give to others. And if you could put it in a written form and hand it to those people as they came in, that's priceless.
Wow.
Didn't I tell you they were a lovely couple?
Oh my
Yep.
goodness.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing life story.